Hello, everyone. Good morning, good lunchtime for many of us here in Central Europe. Good evening for those especially in Korea. We are very pleased, even excited to welcome you to this session of the Think Tank 2022, Co-Creating Spaces for Peace and Reconciliation on the Korean Peninsula. What steps are women taking towards sustainable peace? My name is Carolyn Hanshin. I am the coordinator for the International Association of First Ladies for Peace in the Europe and Middle East and International Vice President for Women's Federation for World Peace International, representing Europe. First, I'd like to give a few brief instructions, especially for those who are seeking translation. We have we have a long list of possibilities if you need interpretation: English, Japanese, French, Russian, Spanish, Korean, and Greek. So you go to the globe at the bottom right-hand side of your screen, I think for most of you, and you can click on that language that you want, and you shouldn't have to change it probably throughout the whole session. So I'd like to basically begin by thanking you for joining us today, taking time from your busy schedule. Also, especially thanks to our partners who have been working with us to prepare this event. That is the International Association of First Ladies for Peace in Korea, as well as Europe and the Middle East, and also the Women's Federation for World Peace in those same areas. It was just 2 years ago, on February 5th, that the International Association of First Ladies for Peace was inaugurated at the Universal Peace Federation's World Summit in 2020 in Seoul, Korea. Actually, just days before COVID began to dramatically alter our way of life. I was able to participate in the launch a month earlier of the first regional Asia-Pacific First Ladies Association in Palau, where the tone was set, I think, for the future of this organization. Women from the Asia-Pacific islands, many of the first ladies of those nations, many of them in matrilineal societies, discussed and planned how to work closely together for the betterment of their husbands, their communities, and especially their delicate environment, and how to work together to do so. There have been efforts to assemble first ladies around the world in groupings of first ladies, and some cultures may not even like this title as much as others. But it does honor a very unique leadership position in a nation. A supportive, non-political, mentor-like or mother-like role. Curious about this, I discovered how so many women who have embraced this role with humility and compassion in their nations have deeply influenced peace, development, and are very loved by their compatriots. Dr. Hak Jahan Moon, the visionary behind this series of events over the next few weeks, had a similar role beside her late husband, a prominent global religious leader, Dr. Sun Myung Moon. Among the many peace-promoting organizations that they founded, the vision for this particular association relating to women's leadership and first ladies surely holds a special place. Our Think Tank 2022 session today is part of months of global awareness raising and thoughtful input to strengthen prospects for lasting peace and shared prosperity on the Korean Peninsula, their homeland. In their many years of dedication, this is the first time to focus on that homeland. We hope that women's leadership could hold the key to weaken the stubborn impasse of mistrust that blocks a future of vibrant and secure peace. And that is what we will be speaking about today. Our speakers from Korea and the West, from government and civil society, younger and some more experienced, all have innovative ideas, projects, and a solidarity that they want to offer. So within our session theme, we've chosen also to highlight one initiative of the Women's Federation that builds upon the Universal Peace Federation founders' vision for the use of zones between areas of conflict for peaceful purposes. In calling for ideas and partners to design a space for women, peace, and the environment in the Korean demilitarized zone, we have found resonance with brilliant and passionate peace-loving partners, including within the First Ladies Association network, who are giving life to this project. To lead us through this session, I am so pleased, honored even, to introduce to you our chair, Dr. Colette Mazuselli. She is a graduate faculty in the graduate faculty at New York University in New York. Her special areas are conflict resolution, radicalization, and religion. And she works, of course, with students who I learned love her very much and appreciate very much her way of educating, as we have one right now in our United Nations office in New York as an intern. We met through one of our presenters today, Dr. Anna Grishting, a close partner in this project and now close friend. Dr. Mazuselli comes not alone, but has engaged some of her students today, as you will see. Dr. Colette Mazuselli, so happy to have you.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. It is truly a pleasure and an honor to chair this virtual meeting, an exchange of reflections that gives us the occasion to listen actively with empathy and respect to voices from the Korean Peninsula, including the youth who bear the responsibility for the future of our planet. As an alumna of the Global Diplomacy Lab, my thinking about the power of youth was profoundly influenced by a chapter written for the edited volume, The Demographic Dividend and the Power of Youth, Voices from the Global Diplomacy Lab, the GDL, edited by Erliani Abdul Rahman, Elsa Marie da Silva, and Sonia Peter Andel. Given the challenges we face today in divided societies, the necessity to create spaces and places for intergenerational dialogue is more urgent than ever. How fitting that this virtual meeting is opened by a First Lady of Cyprus who speaks with us from her experience and understanding. We look forward during this meeting to questions posed by youth, thought leaders who engage in community to envisage and to construct in practical and enduring ways a peaceful future on the peninsula and in our world. Thank you to all the participants who join us today from around the globe for this forward-looking initiative, organized in cooperation with the International Association of First Ladies for Peace. Then it is my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce our first speaker, the First Lady of Cyprus, who joins us today to share her thoughts about our topic. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm very glad to meet you through this way, and I'm
Permit me to first express my gratitude for inviting me to participate in this global forum, at the heart of which is the concern and effort for reconciliation and peace to prevail. This effort is extremely important because, unfortunately, in most of our world, people are facing war, conflicts, or the threat of violence and their consequences. And I would say doubly unfortunate because the tragic experiences of the past were not enough to prevent the recurrence of similar experiences. Almost 77 years since the end of the Second World War and the great victory of the people against Nazism and fascism, humanity is faced with conflicts which can cause a blaze at immense proportions in various regions of the earth. And the danger of a subsequent conflict being nuclear is hanging like a sword of Damocles, an imminent threat over the heads of the people. For 2 years now, almost all over our planet, we have been living with the fear and consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic. The consequences in all areas, but primarily in human losses, are tragic. However, even in these conditions, which demanded solidarity and cooperation between all states, and despite the calls for a ceasefire issued by the UN Secretary General, there has been an escalation of conflicts and an increase in human suffering. Furthermore, there have been violations of international law and of the UN Charter, of national sovereignty, and of the principle of non-interference in the internal affairs of states. Those of us who live in countries across the Mediterranean Sea freeze at the thought that this blue sea has drowned children and is turned into a sea grave for thousands of people. Thousands of lives were lost and continue to be lost because people running away from war, hunger, the effects of climate change, seeking safety and a future for their children and families. Grave responsibilities lie in the European Union and those states that, instead of working and contributing towards solving the causes of the uprooting of people and being made refugees, are building walls. It is a disgrace to the so-called civilized world. Reports and statistics reveal another aspect. Instead of channeling resources into education, health, science, and culture, billions are lavishly channeled to the war industry and armaments. The region of the Eastern Mediterranean and Middle East is being targeted by the war industries of a number of states, adding to the vicious circle and leading to a further escalation of tensions. In this environment, the task before us is to work to reverse these trends and contribute to a peaceful development and cooperation. Women can play a special role by uniting forces to bring about understanding and mutual respect, because we want our children to build the future and not to be killed to serve other interests. My country, Cyprus, this small island in the Mediterranean, has been divided for almost 48 years, with 37% of its territory under Turkish occupation. Only the peaceful reunification of the people and the country within the framework of a bizonal, bicommunal federation with political equality as defined by the UN Secretary General's reports can ensure a common future for Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots. Our experience in Cyprus has shown that trust between communities is built step by step on the basis of honesty, mutual respect, understanding, and will. I would like to give an example. The deepest human wound we have in Cyprus is the drama of the families of the 2,000 Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot missing persons in our modern tragic history. Through the biggest bicommunal project, namely the Missing Persons Committee, where Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot scientists are working together, the remains of 1,023 people have been identified and returned to their families for burial. However, after almost half a century, there are still 979 missing persons whose remains haven't been found. All through this effort to resolve the humanitarian issue and drama, we Cypriots rely on the scientific and financial assistance provided by the international community. By bringing the truth to surface, we have spoken honestly, because a mother's pain is the same in any language she speaks. The families of the missing persons have become agents of mutual understanding and cooperation, demonstrating to Cypriots a strong, positive, tangible example for the future. Based on the above, but also on many other experiences in my country and our region, I believe that the co-creation of peace and reconciliation spaces on the Korean Peninsula can be a bridge for the development of cooperation. If there is an agreement to develop such spaces, then certainly the women of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and the Republic of Korea can develop activities that help to get to know, understand, and respect each other. The positive climate that they could create would make a positive contribution to any efforts to promote understanding and cooperation. In any case, goodwill and sincerity are essential. The international community can support this effort in a mainly political manner, as long as it does not try to impose what it itself considers from outside to be the correct thing to do, but should respect the views of Korean women themselves. With these thoughts in mind, I close by thanking you again for the invitation extended and wish you every success in your efforts in the interests of peace and cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for that wonderful and insightful presentation. Her Excellency, Mrs. Elsie Christofia, is born in Cyprus, wife of the former president of the Republic of Cyprus from 2008 to 2013. She has 3 children, 2 daughters and 1 son. She graduated from the Moscow Institute of Social Sciences, is interested in theater, music, and art in general. She's active with several humanitarian and cultural NGOs and serves as a member of the Central Committee of the AKEL Party. Your Excellency, thank you so much again for that beautiful and warm presentation. We are truly touched by your presence here today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Please. Next, I would like to introduce Dr. Anna Grichting-Solder, the founder of Border Meetings, a Doctor of Design, a DDDS from Harvard University, 2008. Dr. Grichting is also a diploma in architecture from the University of Geneva. She is a senior fellow at the Institute of Environmental Diplomacy and Security at the University of Vermont, and a dear colleague and friend. Anna, we look so much forward to hearing your presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Colette, for this very kind invitation, and also to Carolyn and all the organizers and Women's Federation for World Peace. So I'm going to share my screen and start my presentation. Please do let me know if you can see my screen. Is everything working?
Wonderful, Anna, wonderful.
Okay, perfect. So thank you again. I'm going to talk about the Korea DMZ Peace Incubator for Women, Peace and Environment in the DMZ, with whom we're collaborating with Women's Federation for World Peace and also Dr. Colette Mazuselli at New York University and many other stakeholders. So the background for my approach to this work is also women, peace and environment. And Wangari Maathai in 2004, when I was starting my PhD on Cyprus, was the first woman to get the Peace Prize with a project linked to the environment. It was the Green Belt in Kenya. So the work is very much rooted in women, peace and environment. I'm very honored, actually, I would like to say, to come after Her Excellency, the First Lady of Cyprus, and my PhD was on the Cyprus buffer zone, and I was very honored, actually, to meet the First Lady and her husband in some occasion in I think it was a British embassy in Cyprus. So it's a great honor to be with Her Excellency today. And Cyprus is very near to my heart, and also where some of this work was conducted. So I would just like to mention that the importance of environmental peace building. Yesterday opened the second International Conference on Environmental Peace Building. So it's a very important and emerging field. I will also be presenting some of this work tomorrow. So you're welcome to join us tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. So I'm an architect and urbanist. So my work is really also very spatially rooted. My work started in Berlin at the fall of the Berlin Wall, and what I designed a space of memory and also ecology for the Berlin Wall. But I was very interested in how this space transformed, how the Iron Curtain transformed. So what's really interesting is that there was an initiative, a bottoms-up initiative in Germany to save this space as an ecological belt. And this is actually what happened. So you can actually cycle all the way through Germany on a bicycle through the former border. I presented this in Cyprus for the 20 years of the German unity, and it was also the UN Year of Biodiversity 2010. This was at the this was hosted and supported by the German embassy at the Cyprus Media Center. So the idea was to show this example of what had happened in the former border of Germany, and to say, well, how that could inspire also future projects for the buffer zone. Here you can see the Cyprus buffer zone and the DMZ in Korea. So how I started to look at both of these landscapes as future ecological landscapes of memory. So here, this is a conference in Korea. So as you can see, as an architect, an urbanist and peace builder, we're not sort of looking at how to create the walls or build the walls, but really how to transform these spaces of division. So this is one of the representations. Was I just, created this Cyprus Green Landscapes Laboratory, looking at biological and cultural diversity, a multi-scalar approach. So looking at the parcels of the walled city, but also at the whole regional approach. The regional approach is obviously very important in all these political situations, but also actually in biodiversity conservation. And any kind of biodiversity or environmental conservation is very important to look at from a regional perspective. So these were different scenarios that were developed along the buffer zone, going from marine nature reserve for monk seals. As I was talking about the regional approach, actually these monk seals have been spotted around this area, but they're also spotted in the area between Greece and Turkey, which is actually the contested area in the sea. So these endangered species are often in these contested areas. So it goes also to copper mine remediation, organic farming, eco-museums, a solar campus in the former international airport, the Green Line Heritage Garden of Forgiveness, archaeological villages, wetland remediation, and an eco-city, which is already, other ideas for this have been developed in near Famagusta, Varosha. So these are just some of the endangered species that have been actually observed by scientists, Turkish Cypriot and Greek Cypriot scientists in the buffer zone. And this is the famous monk seal. In red, you can see the territories of the monk seal. So obviously these seals cross all the borders. And also the mouflon, which is a specific animal in Cyprus. And actually the scientists, when they went into the buffer zone, they found that actually they had taken over this abandoned village in Varicea, the Mouflon. There's also birds, of course, there's migratory birds and different habitats where some even endangered species have, re-emerged. And one of the ideas behind this is how do we transform this military landscape? So one idea is really you can transform these, the lookout posts into field stations and observatories. So there's kind of an archaeology of the conflict. So this is a project we did with my students also, looking at the Riparian Restoration, these rivers that cross obviously the DMZ. So how do we restore them? Here you can see the wildlife, you can see the women, the youth, the people enjoying these restored areas. And these are the copper culture, these are the copper mines also, which are actually in and within the close to the buffer zone. And a lot of them have been abandoned. And copper was actually, the name Cyprus comes from copper and was associated also with Venus and Aphrodite. So the idea is we could reignite in fact these kind of feminine matriarchal cultures and also remediate these copper mines into these cultural, archaeological and memory landscapes. We were also looking at this idea of a park, a peace park in Nicosia. And my work was also translated into an art exhibition, which happened in 2012, which was funded by the European Union. So I was looking at chess sets as representations of territory. So it was a way to translate this idea in another form. I also created a spatial sound musical project called The Seven Sleeping Saints. This was sort of across the border as well. I won't go into these too much, but I was actually there when the Annan Peace Plan was voted in 2004. My first visit was in 2003. And I was also blessed to meet Michael Muller, who was at that time the special representative for the UN. And thanks to him, I was able to visit the UN and develop this project with the Harvard Program on Conflict Research. And the idea was to say, maybe there is biodiversity, and with scientists, we could, observe this. So in 2008, as you can see the reference below, a study was actually conducted by UNDP with scientists from North and South Cyprus to see what biodiversity there was. So in fact, this actually created a study of biodiversity. So these ideas can actually, scale up. And following this in 2010, I was funded for a workshop with scientists from North and South Cyprus, with artists, with Salim Ali, a specialist in environmental peace building, with members from UNDP, UNEP in Geneva, IUCN, etc. So the idea was really bringing this idea and also looking at a tool for digital mapping of this area, because it's difficult to collaborate across these borders. So how can we spatially engage these people across the border? And the result was this kind of prototype, which was on National Geographic. So as part of Geneva Peace Week last year, where we were collaborated with Women's Federation for World Peace and our project on the Korean demilitarized zone, we tried to engage different stakeholders all around the world, different people who had already worked on these. There's one wonderful example in Cyprus called the Home for Cooperation, which I visited many times, where there's been many conferences, which is actually situated in the buffer zone. There's also the Association for Historical Dialogue, very important to rewrite the history in a more inclusive way, in a more peaceful way. So these spaces already exist. They were supported and funded by some of the embassies. And as you can see, it's actually in the UN buffer zone, and it's a building that's been rehabilitated and regenerated. So now we're going to come across for the women across the DMZ, and I think there's a lot of history, which some of it Carolyn Hanchen has already given us, but just to say there is a precedent for women working across the DMZ for peace. There have been peace marches across the DMZ, Korea Peace Now, also women engaging. And this is actually when women from North and South were able to meet and actually go to Mount Kumgan in North Korea, a very sacred mountain. So there's already been a precedent for these physical meetings. So this is very important to work on. And we have one of our, I was mentioning the stakeholders. So why we are situated in Geneva and in Switzerland. So Switzerland is considered a neutral nation and has a presence in the Korean demilitarized zone with the Neutral Nations Supervisory Committee. And so thanks to Caroline, one of our sort of partners is Major General Urs Gerber, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today, but he's also President Foundation for Swiss Armed Forces. So it's also very beneficial for us to reach out to these people who know the DMZ, who have also an experience and knowledge of the terrain and also the military, the military terrain. And what's interesting is he actually has a memory of these. He was there when these women crossed the DMZ. So it's very important to bring all of these people together. So he will, also be working with us in the future. I visited and presented the DMZ Peace Park project in 2009. I was invited to present the DMZ Peace Park project to, this was General Jos and Kasparis. So I just wanted to say this is actually in Panmunjom. There's some buildings with the Swiss flag on them. And so the idea is, of course, looking at spatially also these, what could be the future uses for these spaces. So it could be that, these could be transformed also in the future. Now here I'm just looking at also the other stakeholders and youth. Here this is thanks to Colette, one of her students, who is interested to contribute also to the project. And the sacred sites, I just mentioned Mount Keumgumsang. So this is where the women met, and also this importance of these sacred sites, which are common to both sides in Korea. They sort of predate the conflict. So these are important sacred and spaces where these meetings can take place. So we were talking about, youth, women and NGOs, the importance also of bringing the youth around the table. We had also 2 young Koreans who contributed to Geneva Peace Week and who've been conducting surveys with the Mireille project. So they're really aiming at young people in their 20s and 30s, building bridges with North Korea. So today we're very, very grateful also to have a young North Korean with us today. So we're really building up these networks of the youth. So we also, I mentioned before, the birds and the cranes. So this is a project which I've been which I know very well, which is the Crane Foundation. And there's also the project turning the DMZ into a peace zone. So there are many organizations who are working on this. Professor Kyung Do-soo is one of them, but it's very important, obviously, the roles that NGOs will play in it before it actually becomes an official project. So it's very important to prepare the terrain for the future solution. This is also a young student from New York University. She's Korean, and she's also wants to contribute to this project. Now we're looking also at earth rights, nature rights, and human rights. I also collaborated with People for Earth Korea. The former Minister of Justice of Korea is the executive director, and she's very interested in looking at the rights of earth jurisprudence, which is the rights of Mother Earth, the rights of rivers, the rights of mountains, which we are seeing increasingly being developed and integrated into our legislative system. So that's also a very important approach, with this legal approach to recognizing the rights of nature and the rights of the DMZ. And here you can actually see a mapping of these endangered species along the Korean demilitarized zone. Also, the sort of human rights, people's rights, and as we were saying, nature's rights are very important. So we're also collaborating with a specialist in indigenous rights, human rights, and people's rights. So it's also about going from the ego to the eco, from human-centric laws to more earth-centric laws. So integrating all of these into the project. And of course, conserving biodiversity through this environmental peace building. So I'm also affiliated with the Institute for Environmental Diplomacy and Security. Azim Zia works a lot also on transboundary cooperation on water. He has a huge global project working with communities. So it's also a participative approach, which is what we're also engaged in, looking at environmental diplomacy and grassroots organizations. So these collaborations are also very important to gain know-how. This is a colleague from my student years. She works for UNDP, and she also founded Green Legacy. This is a beautiful project where they've taken the seeds and saplings of the trees of Hiroshima, because they were basically the only things that survived, and planting them all over the world. So in a way, they're sort of planting this peace, you know, through trees with the seedlings of Hiroshima. So this is something that we could also integrate in our Garden of Peace, and making this link to Japan, as we also have some youth, Korean youth from Japan. So this also relates to what we could call, you know, science diplomacy, environmental diplomacy. And this is something that one of our former presidents, politician who's now professor, this sort of active neutrality that she was promoting, and that, you know, that Switzerland, to show really Switzerland's role. And also she's a member of the Council of Women World Leaders. So as we today are with the first ladies, all the, you know, the importance of these women world leaders in promoting these approaches. So here we actually have our colleague today, Colette, who's a very important partner as well, bringing in also obviously the listening, the importance of listening, which is extremely important, her experience in practice and teaching, and also bringing in all these students who are very, very eager to contribute to these kinds of projects. Inclusive peace, as Ban Ki-moon has mentioned. And we also have other, you can see actually these on the Geneva Peace Week video, so I'm not going to read them all out. I just wanted to mention many of these stakeholders. This is from the University of Cyprus, Hands Across the Divide. This is also women working across the divide in Cyprus. Nature and culture, as I was mentioning, the Crane Foundation, they actually work in North Korea with these migratory birds that fly across, that stop in the DMZ. What's very interesting is that they also found the North Korean scientists through Japan, because there are a couple of million Koreans, North Koreans living in Japan with North Korean passports. So they were actually the entrance point. So that's very interesting through scientists, and as we've seen through the youth, is how we can connect to North Korea, because of course that's quite tricky. So what do they still share?
Anna?
Yes.
If I may, dear, somehow I'm being alerted, and this is such a beautiful presentation.
Yes.
I'm being alerted that we have something with the video, so we may have to begin that fairly soon. But this is a beautiful presentation, so I encourage you perhaps to share a few more remarks, and then we could proceed to the video.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
I don't have a video, but there's a video, I think.
So
From...
the video, Carolyn's, exactly. That's the one I'm talking. That's the Christine's. That's the one I'm talking about.
Christine.
Thank you so much, dear.
Okay, so I will wrap up very quickly. There's still shared feasts, Chuseok, which is shared by North and South, so we can build on these. One of these projects we'd like to develop is the Korean cosmetic tradition and traditional plants. So these are kind of business opportunities that can be created in the DMZ. And this was something I discussed with the director in Clarence. Arts, music and dance. Going back to also shamanic cultures, creating social spaces and businesses, architecture, urbanism and landscape. As I said, a Korean bathhouse. This was a competition in the DMZ. I looked at the railway stations, the importance of these dismantled railway stations, but accessibility. How do we bring these women to this space? We've also talked about a 5th UN office. So this is an incubator for a 5th UN office. And, the Swiss, these spaces could be also incubators for these ideas. Also the future assembly, what is the new paradigm for a new UN office here? And here are some sort of conceptual frameworks. I started mapping the stakeholders of this space in the DMZ. Also looking at all the scales we're working at, from micro scales to macro scales of diversity. Also looking at this virtual platform that we can use the metaverse not only to meet, but also to design. It's also a space in which we can design this virtual and physical space. And Pyeongchang Peace Forum is actually going to have a meta DMZ Peace Zone in its future. You can actually register for this Peace Forum, which is coming up very soon. So I'll finish off here. This is actually a video I had, but you can see it on our Geneva Peace Week video, which we'll be very happy to share. I can actually share that in the chat for anybody who wants to see more detail about the project. So thank you. I hope I wasn't too long. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Anna. We must thank you first for that exquisite and creative presentation. I believe that I speak for so many who wrote in the chat that they were truly inspired by your presentation. It's inspiring to work with you. Your work is sui generis. and it offers so much as we think about the future of conflict resolution and the nature of peace building. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Colette.
Please, our pleasure indeed. Carolyn, I believe now we are going to proceed to a beautiful video that has been prepared by Magister Christine Mutonen of Austria, who is elected as a member of the National Parliament of Austria, 2003 to 2017, being a member, a substitute for the Council of Europe in the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. She was elected president of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly 2016 and 2017, and as a special representative for Central Asia as well. Magister Mutonen is committed to strengthening conflict resolution capacities in international organizations in foreign policy. Other priorities include the emphasis on the role of women in conflicts in connection with the UN Security Council Resolution 1325, as well as nuclear disarmament. So I would ask my colleagues, please, if we may now view this video. Thank you.
Dear participants, it is a pleasure being here with you today, if not in person, at least virtually. It is a very important issue for women creating and taking over spaces for themselves. Having a closer look at cities, for example, you will find that public spaces are often found to be the domain of men, and even public playgrounds the domain of boys. So there is a necessity to create spaces for women even in daily life. When it comes to peace building and peacekeeping, you will find even fewer female protagonists. Quite often, even none, although 22 years ago, the UN Resolution 1325 had been adopted. The resolution reaffirms the importance of women in the prevention of conflict in peace building, peacekeeping, and peace negotiations. However, it lacks implementation. Some countries established national action plans, many have not. So it is a very valuable and important idea to create virtual and actual spaces for women. The aim is to give women a structure where they can meet in a secure, inspiring environment, thus using their enormous potential, knowledge, and creativity. In such spaces for peace and reconciliation, I'm sure that creativity will grow and common visions will be developed across all borders, even and especially across those borders in our minds. A debate and a reflection on, with and through culture certainly offers an ideal playground. Culture and art certainly is a means to bring women together to get to know and understand each other better. At the same time, we have to think of future generations. How can we prevent to have pre-existing stereotypes and prejudice getting stuck in young girls' and women's minds? And which platform, which space, which environment do they need to make their own experiences with the other, the unknown, with those across the border? We definitely need spaces and options for cultural exchange, spaces for dialogue and experience. In these spaces, women and girls can evaluate the world around them, the world on the other side of the border. They can reflect, discuss, contradict, confront, explain and understand. They can laugh and weep together. Art and culture will help. It will support. This is where peace and reconciliation starts. There are outstanding examples where people gained new perspectives for their lives. Music can play an important role. Playing instruments together or participating in a jointly singing enables relaxation in tense situations, fosters creativity and self-expression, and evokes a feeling of togetherness, creating a strong bond of connection. It can also be a means of escaping reality for a while, which sometimes is needed in the beginning of a reconciliation process. When I tried to bring only a few women together from hostile nations, It didn't work at the beginning. But when we started to talk about the weather, films we had seen, and when we addressed personal problems we were facing as women, the ice broke. Slowly we could start to talk about burning issues. Theater, plays, dancing, or creating common pieces of art and culture. Art and culture has the potential of bringing women together from both sides, addressing fundamental questions which otherwise wouldn't have been raised. Co-designing a space for women, peace and environment in the Korean demilitarized zone is a project with a holistic approach. It is a project with a vision for peace. Bringing women together in a virtual space is the first and very important step. The second step will be a common project or common projects by women on both sides along the border in the demilitarized zone. And the third step could be to find ways to open up the borders for women to actually meet and embrace in the demilitarized zone to continue their work on common projects. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for highlighting this video for us today. And now we would like to turn to a question and answer session. Carolyn, shall we begin with the participants? How would you like us to proceed, dear?
Please, I think you can go ahead with, you have some questions from your students, I think, that you have prepared.
We do, Carolyn, and I think after that inspiring video by Magister Mitonen, I think that one of the first questions really is, how do we envisage that projects, holistic projects, for the possible unification on the peninsula could bring more unity to the region? And I think Dr. Grichting has showed us so many potential projects that we could engage in. And I think one of the questions is, what type of specific project, and perhaps Dr. Grichting, you can join us here in this discussion with the candidates and those asking questions. What type of particular project might we envisage in a place for unification in the peninsula? Please go ahead.
Should I?
Yes, please, you can begin, and I think that the others will chime in, dear.
Yes. Well, maybe I'll build on what Her Excellency, the First Lady, spoke of. She spoke about the work on the missing persons in Cyprus, and that's something that I've followed as well. I actually attended an event in Germany with some of the missing persons from North and South Cyprus. And Sevgil Uldag, she'd written a lot about, they're saying our common pain is our common future. So I think this work of memory and missing persons and commemoration is very important. And I think I mentioned this idea of the garden of forgiveness. You know, there's a whole thing about memory, forgetting and forgiveness. So we mustn't actually forget, but we need to, in a way, commemorate for the future, and we also need to forgive. And I think a lot of the work that's being done in Cyprus is about that. The missing persons is about this. It's a process. So I think in Korea, we have many victims, because it's not just North and South Koreans, as in Cyprus. You always have also all the soldiers from around the world, the allies who were also victims. You have journalists who were victims. You know, so there are many, many victims. And now that we also have, when we talk about the Japanese, we could say, you know, there's also a lot of conflict, you know, with and past histories with Japan. So for me, the work of memory in the space of memory, I think is one place, you know, that we can start this work. And, you know, I think this idea of a landscape of memory, not a monument, but starting with landscape and ecology. And this idea for Cyprus, it's also that saying, what are the positive evolutions, which is obviously the, you know, the biodiversity, the nature, which has, you know, come back alive again. How do we work with nature and also work in this process of healing the people and healing the landscape?
Indeed, and I think the key word that you mentioned, Dr. Grichting, Anna, is holistic. This idea of bringing first and foremost us together with nature and thinking in practical ways as to how we might create these places for dialogue. And I think the First Lady has also emphasized through her experience that our contributions altogether can be so invaluable. And these contributions can provide perhaps other creative ideas in comparative contexts. I mean, Korea certainly is a crucial area for us to consider, but there are other areas in the world indeed where our dialogue and our thinking today in a forward-looking way may help us come together. Yes, Carolyn, please.
Yeah, if I could just add a word. For me, it's so amazing to meet with others who have different backgrounds and then somehow different visions for this. From my side, working in the area of human rights, working at the UN with women, conflict resolution, my first idea was to actually establish a place, not thinking necessarily yet of the whole park, the whole environmental area, but really designing a place where women could meet, as we had the experience, when we brought 730 or 40 women to the DMZ, designing a place where the women from the north and the women from the south could come together, free of any kind of bureaucratic kind of constraints, to really work on projects for peace together. And then bringing in youth, maybe eventually bringing in women from around the world. And so there are so many dimensions to this that I find, the constraint is really the political mistrust between the leaders. And if we can do something that builds trust, even at that small place, and it can be accepted by the political leaders, I think there's a possibility of it growing also.
Carolyn, I mean, your comment certainly speaks to questions raised about how we can bring these political leaders on board, because of course, I think these holistic approaches are so essential. Yet it is, of course, the resistance of those who are used to more traditional forms of diplomacy, who perhaps are not as open to listening to new approaches and to hearing new ideas, holistic ideas about peace building from the ground up. These are the persons perhaps with whom we have to engage, bringing more women into the dialogues and bringing more women to the table so that we can actually see a process of transformation. And this is once again why I was so inspired to listen to the First Lady of Cyprus, because I think she understands the need to bring these important stakeholders into our dialogue. And that is our challenge. And it is a challenge for us. It is a challenge for the next generation.
Είναι πραγματικά άξια συγχαρητηρίων η ομάδα των γυναικών που ανέλαβε αυτή την πρωτοβουλία για να φέρει σε επικοινωνία γυναίκες από την περιοχή μας και από την περιοχή της Ανατολής της Κορέας, για να συζητήσουμε αυτό το πάρα πολύ φλέγον θέμα που σχετίζεται με την ειρήνη. Και πραγματικά στην Κύπρο έχουμε αρκετές εμπειρίες προσπαθειών επανένωσης της χώρας και του λαού μας. Το παράδειγμα των αγνωμένων που ανέφερα πριν είναι έναν από όλα, αλλά είχαμε στο παρελθόν και πορείες γυναικών. Έχουμε συνέχεια εκδηλώσεις μαζί με τις συμπατριώτισσες μας, τουρκοκύπριες και όχι μόνο, και άντρες και γυναίκες. Κάνουμε αρκετές κοινές κινητοποιήσεις προς αυτήν την κατεύθυνση.
It is really commendable that this group of women has taken this initiative to bring together women from the two sides, because this is really the way that peace can start being built. And in Cyprus, we have lots of experiences where we brought women from North and South, Turkish and Greek Cypriot women, and we built different projects. And of course, the missing persons, as I explained, was an enormous project that brought people together. And in this general effort, we really wish the international community, the United Nations, the General Secretary can be involved. So all the destructions and all the situations can be improved. All our efforts need to be towards this direction. I thank you for this opportunity, and I thank you for exposing also Cyprus issue, which we can have the opportunity to prolong through this discussion.
Indeed, Your Excellency, we thank you. Cyprus is certainly for us a context from which we have much to learn, and we look forward to learning and to listening, coming from this context and then sharing our thoughts with others. Carolyn, I see other questions in the chat. I wanted to check in with you. How much time would you like us to allow for this?
Maybe another 5 minutes. Can we start?
Excellent.
Yeah,
No,
because we have two more speakers still.
Absolutely, absolutely. We have a question from Neela Chipolkati, and after listening to Anna's presentation, that question is how Koreans can use some of the ideas in practice. The political leaders, of course, may not buy into this holistic approach. We need to press on, bringing peace. So Anna, I believe that you had mentioned a number of ideas in your presentation. What idea first comes to mind to you, though, practically, when you think about a place of reconciliation for the Koreas?
Well, I think it's a difficult question because I think there's different scales, and the Koreans, I've been traveling there and working as I've done on Cyprus, really on the big vision, because there's a huge opportunity for this large scale approach, which is important also for for ecology biodiversity. On the other hand, there's also the importance, and as Carolyn highlighted, to start and with a space which can be physical, virtual, but a small space where women can meet. And this has already in a way started. There's already been a meeting, and I would say virtually in a way, maybe we're already a little bit in that space now, with all together and with Her Excellency and bringing together all this knowledge. So I think there's different scales of work, and I think there are Koreans working on the peace part. There's different initiatives and different provinces and working on that. I think there's not really what we're doing the space for the women that we're working on together with Carolyn, on which the Women's Peace Federation has already been working on, and they've already had these meetings with women. So I think that's a really very special thing that the Women's Federation is doing, and also the idea of the 5th UN office. So I think these are both kind of different scales, and which means they have different time scales as well. Coming back to Cyprus, that an example of maybe the kind of space that we would create. I mentioned the Home for Cooperation in the DMZ. So that's a small space, but it's a little bit maybe like what we could imagine Carolyn was in a way expressing. A space, the Home for Cooperation, is a space where the people from both sides can come because it's in the buffer zone, and where all these initiatives and associations and events can take place. And then I showed the Swiss space in Panmunjom, saying, well, if ever they're decommissioned, who knows, maybe that could be a space for that, because it's a little bit like the Home for Cooperation. So of course I don't have any answers and recipes, but I think there's different approaches, different spatial scales, and different time scales of projects.
Indeed, and I was intrigued in your presentation to see the mention of M-City, of the metaverse, and of course our Korean friends are already in their own initiatives taking this into consideration. I think that it is the province of architects and designers, as well as educators, to be thinking about these twin cities, these mirror images, and how we might, even on a small scale, begin to think about creative ways of engaging women in this type of an initiative. And I look forward to brainstorming creatively further with many of our participants about these possibilities. Indeed, another question from Sanya is how we can bring political leadership in at the earlier stages of any projects holistically that we think about. This way they have a stake, they feel engaged, and perhaps in some ways we mitigate resistance by having an earlier dialogue and bringing people into the conversations. And I was wondering, Carolyn or Your Excellency, Anna, if you had some ideas about this?
I'm sure, Madam Christofia, you know better than I. I would maybe just say that, for instance, our efforts at the United Nations in Geneva through the Human Rights Council, we made a whole series of events on this theme. And we had always invited the missions of North and South Korea, the ambassadors, and we had, all those working in those missions and the different governments that were, are especially interested in this area and, feeling responsible in this area. But of course, it was very, 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 of course, very delicate, and whenever we saw something would happen in that region or in that, perhaps in North Korea, then of course, all of a sudden the doors were closed down. And so we need something that is really stable and, that is not so much affected maybe by these changes of, opinion, attitude, action. And, but I don't know, Mrs. Christofia, maybe you have some idea how we could make some larger steps in that direction.
Είναι πάρα πολύ σημαντικό.
It's very important to make common efforts from both sides, following conferences, meetings, and all sorts of other mobilizations that can bring the two sides together. As women, we are more sensible, more sensitive. We know the need of peace. We have the power and we can contribute to this. And precisely this proposal to have a space where they can meet is very important. And I believe as long as women have decided to do it, they will be able to contribute greatly to the pacification of the whole peninsula.
If I could just add a quick point, if I may.
Please, of course, Anna, please.
Yeah, so I think it's very important to have a multi-level, multifaceted approach and, to always have the bottoms up as well as, the top down, to work on all the levels. And obviously as a designer and urban planner, we always have to look very far ahead. In Berlin, what I learned is you have to have a vision before there's a solution as well, from a spatial point of view, because memory and landscape and these are all the weak things that always get overpowered by economy and military, etc. So it's very important to build this up before there's a solution. And for example, the German Green Belt was actually created by bird watchers and then was scaled up and became an official project. So I think we have to work on all the levels, and as designers, just to keep working on the visions until the moment is right, that they can actually sort of flower.
This, of course, is a complex process, but it's also perhaps a more inclusive process because we have to bring in so many voices with so many different experiential perspectives. Carolyn, I am conscious of time.
Yes.
So perhaps we should be moving on next to our next speaker, and perhaps we could also have in the chat the background also of our next speaker, and I will be delighted to proceed with the introduction, if I may. Very good. All right. So here we are. So am I correct? We are going with Mr. Taesun Chun next. Born in Japan, yes, raised in Japan, a third generation Korean living in Japan, who went to Chosun School for 9 years. And there is our young Mr. Chosun. At present, he is active in advocacy in North and South unification and peace, utilizing personal experience learned in the Chosun School. His grandfather on the mother's side was from the north part of the Korean Peninsula before the division, and the present Democratic People's Republic of Korea. His grandfather, at the age of 16, left home and went to Japan in 1942. And then during the Japanese colonial occupation, never saw his family again. He was the so-called first generation of Koreans living in Japan. And it is such an honor and a pleasure to welcome you, sir, to this dialogue. Please, I invite you to give your presentation.
예, 여러분 안녕하세요. 저는 전대성이라고 합니다. 스피치를 시작하기에 앞서 몇 가지 개념에 대한 설명을 해드리겠습니다. 이것은 식민지와 분단에 위한 문제점의 하나입니다만
Hello, my name is Jeon Tae-sung. My material grandfather was from the north of the Korean Peninsula before division, and from the present-day North Pyongyang province of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
그리고 일본 국내에는 남북 분단을 상징하는 민당과 조선천견이라는 조직이 있습니다. 이번 이야기하는 조선학교는 제일 동포가 42탄이며 조선민주주의 인민공화국을 지지하는 조선천견계 학교로 인식되고 있습니다. 저희 할아버지는 분단 선거의 국적, 현재 조선민주주의 인민공화국 평안남도 주지사입니다.
My grandfather
1942년 16살 때 가족과 생이별을 하여 만주에서 홀로 일본으로 건너온
is the first generation of Koreans living in Japan who came to Japan from Manchuria alone after separation from his family when he was 16 years old in 1942 during the Japanese colonial period. I was born and raised in Japan as a third generation Korean Japanese and attend the Korean school in Japan for 9 years.
그러나 현재는 대한민국과 조선민주주의 인민공화국의 두 나라로 분단되고 있습니다.
There was only one country on the Korean Peninsula for 500 years. However, it is currently divided into two countries, the Republic of Korea and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. It goes without saying that the major cause of the division was the Japanese colonial occupation, but it was the Korean War in 1950 that decided the division in Korea. It is called the Korean War. There is 31 countries that have provided the military and the medical support in this war, and it is said that the number of countries related to the Korean War will rise to 61 if materials and the financial support are included. This indicates that the Korean Peninsula has become a land of proxy wars in the conflict between communism and democracy. The problem of the Korean Peninsula can be said to be a problem of the war. As the Korean Peninsula was divided due to the Korean War, separation due to colonial rule was exacerbated, and the Korean people had more and more separated families. The 38th parallel was drawn in a country that was originally one, and the country and the family was divided, and the state of armistice continues to become a divided country.
그것은 제1통포입니다. 제1통포는 조선 반도가 남북으로 분단되기 전 일본의 식민지 지배로 인하여 여러 가지 이유로 일본에 가야만 했던 사람들입니다. 분단 전은 물론 분단 후에 현재도 많은 분들이 일본에 살고 있습니다.
There is an existence that must not be forgotten when the government considers the unification of South and Korea more concretely. It is a Korean resident in Japan, so-called Zainichi Koreans. Zainichi Koreans are people who had to go to Japan for various reasons due to Japanese colonial occupation before the Korean Peninsula was divided into North and South. Many people lived in Japan both before and after the division. Most of Chinese Koreans have their roots in the south of Joseon at that time, in the present-day Korea, and have family relatives in both South and North Korea. And his or her country is neither South Korea nor North Korea, and he or she is conscious of the Joseon dynasty before division, inheriting the family and national spirit and living in hopes of peace and the unification of the country.
제1통포란 한국 사람이나 북한 사람도 아니고 주로 조선 반도가 분단되기 전 한 나라였을 때.
So what is the biggest characteristics of Joseon school? Chinese Koreans are not South Korean or North Koreans, but people and their descendants who came to Japan before the Korean Peninsula was divided. Having a clear identity as a Korean Chinese is that we have a strong desire to reclaim the country that our grandfathers and grandmothers lived in. In other words, the Joseon school has been providing education for the long-term wish for the unification of North and South Korea. For example, at the sports day of the Joseon school, people learned a lot of songs, dances, and music to play for the unification while mourning the division by hosting a single flag. So this song is also indicated that their wishes. The subject of the distance is the picturing a happy day.
이처럼 학생들은 분단 후
As such, students in Joseon school are still dancing to pray for unification in various places, 76 years after division. We will also introduce speeches from elementary school students who talked about their feelings for the unification at the previous event. What is the biggest wish we want to achieve? Before we were even born, our homeland was divided, and we grow up not knowing our country was unified. My heart is pounding. What we want to achieve more than anything else is a national unification, which is the earnest wish of the people who have come without change yesterday and today. the unification of Korea is my delightness and happiness of all Korean people. What I only wish is the unified Korea. This speech accurately expresses the situation and the feelings of Joseon School students. The students of Joseon School are more closely related to the unification of the two Koreas than anyone else in the world who knows one peninsula and wish for the unification of the two Koreas. Until now, there have been various events all over the world wishing for the unification of South and North Korea. But from now on, I think it will be a more meaningful event if Koreans in Japan also participate in such events. In fact, in 2019, when the spirit of unification was rising, it was unfortunately canceled due to the coronavirus, but only the there are some programs of Joseon School to pray for unification of Korea.
한국의 전념과 북한의 전념, 그리고 조선학교 학생들이 DMZ에 모여 함께 손을 잡고 남북 통일을 바라는 행사를 개최하는 것은 어떨까요? 조선반도뿐만이 아니라 온 세계를 놀라게 하는 행사가 될 것입니다. 저는 조선반도의 평화에
I believe the unification of Korea. What I would like to suggest is how about holding an event in which young Koreans, North and South Korea, and Joseon School students together in the DMZ to hold hands and wish for the unification of the two Koreas. It will be an event that surprises not only the Korean peninsula but the whole world. I believe that the closest people to peace on the Korean peninsula are the students of Joseon School. The unification of North and South Korea will be greatly developed by advancing together with the students of Joseon School. Thank you for your attention.
And thank you so much for that beautiful presentation, artistic, eloquent, and indeed inspiring for us to listen to. We look forward to further dialogue, as Dr. Grichting has mentioned. Please do share your thoughts. Thank you so much. And now I believe we are moving on to our next speaker. As I understand, Dr. Hun-Soon Park. Welcome, Dr. Park. And indeed, it is a pleasure for us to welcome you here. Dr. Park is a scholar, a professor of UN Affairs and International Relations, as well as the Vice President of the UNA Republic of Korea. Dr. Soon Park, we are delighted to welcome you here. Please begin your presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mazuselli. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to everybody. Warm greetings from Korea. It is my great pleasure and privilege to speak at this conference. Most of all, I'm very grateful to the organizers, the IAFLP and the WFWPI for the invitation, and in particular with the distinguished leaders from Europe and Eurasia. As Vice President of UNA Korea and the Scholar in International Affairs, I have been collaborating World Women's Federation for World Peace in Korea over the last couple of years for the ideas of the DMZ peace and the so-called the 5th UN of Peace campaign in Korea. fully recognizing the significance of international solidarity in facilitating peace on the Korean Peninsula. I fully support the goals, activities by your organizations through this campaign. So much is said already by previous speakers. I try to concentrate on my own experience in my work in this regard. As you are aware, Korean Peninsula remains a very unfortunate place of tension throughout modern times. Two Koreas separated independent countries as members of the United Nations have maintained contrasting systems with obvious political, economic, and ideological differences. South Korea is one of the most dynamic country with the 10th largest vibrating economy. Unfortunately, current tension in the peninsula mostly comes from North Korea, its aggressive military provocation, especially by continuing nuclear weapons development. North Korea is the most isolated country, economic hardship with excessive military buildup. Already declaring de facto nuclear state, North Korea continuously developing its advanced missile technology and the nuclear weapons technology. Of course, South Korea is very much willing to and fully cooperate with the brothers and sisters in North Korea with massive economic and development humanitarian assistance. If and when North Korea, the regime is ready to give up nuclear development and instead to committing openness and reform. So situation is not so bright yet. So much is said already by previous speakers about the various scenarios and propositions. But the relationship between two countries is very tense, considering the ongoing instability and anxiety in the Korean Peninsula. Of course, it is very imperative to find a wise way to overcome the difference peacefully and reconcile two governments and people. Whatever the means, whatever the level may be, we should make hard efforts. Therefore, the efforts for making physical and virtual spaces utilizing the DMZ, as we discussed today, a very innovative idea, well-grounded peace movement. Therefore, campaign on the notion of DMZ peace, as we discussed and proposed, can be a very small but still very important step. Already discussed so many specific proposals proposed by the Korean government, by the civic groups, with the idea of so-called peace park complex, such as a conference venue with the UN offices and other international organizations, even civil society organizations, and or the idea of eco park as a model of environmental preservation and biodiversity conservation already discussed, combined with educational and training institutions, international neutral zone with the performing arts or cultural centers. Fortunately, the South Korean government is very positive about all of these ideas and proposals. So very few people deny the utility of this peaceful gesture, but we should come more specific action programs So I'd like to add up just my own humble ideas from my own experience with these ideas. So IAFLP and the WFWPI should come up with some specific plans how to implement these ideas from the bottom-up approach, taking advantage of its legitimacy, moral authority, and international prestige. So we can come up with a more systematic approach, designing some specific plans, for example, including education and public campaigns for raising the awareness of the public and leaders from home and abroad, officials from the public institutions and international agencies. Also, we can organize a forum like this, sharing ideas, doing researches, making policy recommendations, expanding networking, publicizing the outcome of the campaign to the public. In other words, your organization can serve as the, as you mentioned, the role of international hub for initiator, for facilitator, for convener, or bridge builder role. Second, we should expand our global partnership. I think that we can go ahead with the UN, cooperating with the UN bodies. You already mentioned about the, your attempt in the Human Rights Council. I think that we can continue to make our ideas as agenda and adoption of the resolutions in the UN bodies like CSW, Commission on the Status of Women, ECOSOC, UNESCO, UNDP, and UNEP. Third, we can have more direct engagement with the two stakeholders, South and North Korean governments and people, inducing, persuading, or putting pressure on them, whatever the opportunity to engage in international events and programs, especially with the North Korean people. Another idea may be the pushing up the UN Fifth Office campaign on a wider scale. Already many of you understand the main ideas regarding this UN Fifth Office. So most Koreans very supportive, since we have a very special feelings of attachment to the presence and role of the UN. Korean government also very supportive. Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is active on this issue. Also, as mentioned, interestingly enough, there are several petitions from the local governments in competition to host the future international bodies in their provinces. So lastly, if I may mention my own work, I have done several researches under the public and private projects on the detailed proposals in implementing the ideas of hosting the UN agency in the DMZ or nearby DMZ. UNA Korea, I belong to, also plans to continue starting with the ideas of searching and inviting suitable organizations or even creating new international organizations. So in closing, I would like to say that trusting the UPF, World Women's Federation for World Peace, International Association of First Ladies for Peace, very much for your capability, the achievement already made, and the potential for the future. I will be happy to collaborating with the leaders and participants of this campaign. Should we have any extra time, then I'll be very happy to answer your questions. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Dr. Hoon Park, for your wonderful presentation. and for your willingness also perhaps to take one or two questions if we have time. And Carolyn, I would defer to you for that answer, please. Carolyn, you are on mute, dear.
Maybe I have to defer to the technicians because we are just at time.
Yes.
But it would be nice. I thought also, especially Mr. Taesun Chon, he didn't have such a long time to speak, and I think there was one point that he had wanted to make. So maybe we could at least go for two or three more minutes, huh?
Please, of course, if the technicians will allow us, most welcome to do so. Mr. Taesun, please go ahead.
I think maybe you have to pose. I think you have to pose the question. I know we had spoken with him. If I can just jump in here,
Please,
we had spoken with him, posing this idea about what if the youth of South and North Korea would have a place to meet at the DMZ or wherever. What kind of possibilities could develop through that? What from the mind of a young person from North Korean origin with North Korean origins?
May I just intervene?
Yes.
Please, sir, please.
Because I have experience with the Joseon school in Tokyo 15 years ago. As you may know, the organization, the 통일 Foundation created what we call World University Federation about 25, 30 years ago. As a chapter in Asia, I was the Secretary General of the Asia University Federation, where the some university hosted the secretariat. So when we had the annual conference of presidents of universities in Asia, we thought it's a good idea to invite Joseon University in Tokyo. So we visited then the university, and then we got good greetings from school, from the professors and the students. They promised they will come to Korea, and we guaranteed permission from our government to greet them. Then we are waiting for their answers, and then they said that they cannot get permission from those Korean government at the time. So I was very disappointed. So I just wondering from John Taesun, is it possible, that from your pure, young, passionate people, you would like to be anywhere, any place, with the Korean or any other people, young people around the world. But it's a matter of not us or Korean, South Koreans, but I think it's a matter of your own school, unfortunately. So I just wondering, is there any possibility now you have any way that that you can get the permission and then that persuade your university, the school? Thank you.
Thank you.
はい、日本語でお答えします。実際にその朝鮮大学の教授の方。
Okay, I will answer in Japanese. So, students have no
Estoy
limitation.
pasando al inglés, pero no hay
So,
traducción. En
as a
inglés tampoco.
students of the Joseon school, we are all free. Actually, in Korea, so actually there are some organization in the Yonki organization, young people, Korean young people and students together. So we will go to Korea, and also Korean people, students come to Joseon school.
Chosen University School. So already we have a kind of connection and exchange. So Korean young people cannot go to North Korea, right? So North Korean young people cannot come to Korea. But so there's actually interesting place. It is a Korean young people, students can come, and North Korean students can. Is a chosen school in Japan. So don't you think it's interesting?
So certainly, I'm very interested in, that I can make all efforts to really implement those ideas, because we tried it 15, 16 years ago, we couldn't make it. But this time, as you suggested, we may try again then, whatever the level may be, whatever the venue may be, because I'm very much involved with the Korean Model UN, National Collegiate Model UN, many other international forum. So I think that it's a great opportunity for me to connect you and promote these ideas into action. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, both to Chon Chae-sung and Dr. Park for this beautiful exchange. And now, if Carolyn, you permit me, I will say introduction for Dr. Zoe Bennett, and then we may proceed with a few remarks from her. So Dr. Zoe Ann Nikolopoulos Bennett is a PhD in Korean literature and folklore, and has studied at the University of Jussieu, Paris, and Yonsei University in Seoul. She is the International Vice President of the Women's Federation for World Peace International, Middle East region. She is also the President of the Women's Federation for World Peace in Cyprus. Please, Dr. Bennett, the floor is yours. Thank you.
I would just thank you very much. Say a big thank you to everyone, to our panelists, to our moderator, wonderful Dr. Mazuselli, for this so exciting session. Really so inspiring, and definitely there is going to be a follow-up. We want to create a working group, something, and we invite everyone to come with their ideas and proceed, because as we saw, no one is alone. We saw so clearly, especially for those who know the Mediterranean situation, how much the division of North and South Korea reflects the divisions of many parts of the world. And actually, this is the main reason, this is the reason why an international organization like ours, all our group of organizations, is so much focused on at least focusing on one country to unite. And so again, I want to say a big thank you to everyone. Just closing this session, but also I would like to invite you to the next one, because the Global Forum is not finished, far from it. It lasts until tomorrow with another 3 sessions. And now at 5 o'clock Central European time, there is going to be another forum hosted by the International Association for Peace and Economic Development, with the theme economic proposals to open and facilitate the relationship of North Korea and the world. Open North Korea to the world. I think it's going to be exciting. Thank you very much to everyone, and have a nice end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Bennett. If I may, we have had a request if we could have a photo at the end of all of the speakers together. I would defer to Carolyn, to Zoe, to see if this is possible. Let's see, I think we're all together now.
Yes.
Very good, and we have an opportunity to take a lovely photo. There we are, beautiful, beautiful. Wonderful. Carolyn, back over to you, dear.
Yeah, I think that closes our meeting for the day. And again, thank you from our side for all of the amazing ideas that have been shared. And absolutely, we have to follow up on all of this. So we will stay in touch, and thank you for the audience for joining us today, who can also be included in this project. We will share, the links and the opportunities, the way to really get in touch with us about this. So thank you again, and good day.
Thank you. Good day. Good day all. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.